Step-Ups, the ATG system. Where do they fit? What are they good for? We're going live with Ben Clarfield is the plan. The Step-Up is part of the ATG system. It fits in alongside, together with the sled. Now, if you're going really hard on the sled, the Step-Up might not be as key as if you're unable to jump in on the sleds. We need that strength from the ground up. We need to be strong. We know that we need to be strong in the foot. We know that we need to be strong in the calf. If we're going to dominate single foot jumping, then it makes sense that we practice something that is like single foot jumping. Mason, how are you? Here we go. We've got the man himself.
Huh.
Mr. Clarfield, how are you?
Here we go.
We're good.
Here we go. Rolling.
Step-Ups. We're talking Step-Ups. When did the Step-Ups come on the radar for you? Was that like very, very early in your training career, or was it a little further in?
A little further in. I think it's funny. Like, I talked to one of my coaches. It's an interesting thing. Sometimes we go to the thing that we're good at, or that sort of makes sense to us, and it's good, and sometimes it's bad. And for me, weirdly enough, I used to play basketball, and I thought lifting was stupid, and I didn't care how people looked. I thought that was also stupid. It's like, so what? Like, you got a 20 pack, but I just crossed you and scored on you. Well, you suck. There was no like, oh, but he's better looking or what. I didn't care about that. When you're athletic, when you think about athletic performance, you think, well, did I or didn't I win? So my back used to really, really hurt after basketball, and my knees hurt. I just thought it was obvious. And I started lifting late. So I think I was 23 when I moved to Canada, 22, 23. I dicked around and did some biceps randomly once in a while, but I never lifted seriously. And my back used to hurt all the time. I think I read in Men's Health, like, deadlifting is good. So I started deadlifting and my back pain disappeared. I was like, oh, this is cool. So I did various rep styles and whatever. And I didn't really look up. It was like Men's Health garbage. So I had no idea. So, but at some point I started figuring out, well, okay, well, how about trying to lift more? So I remember lifting 135 back in the day, and they're like, that's heavy. Not kilos, pounds. So 60, 61 kilo, whatever. I was like, oh, this is weird. And meanwhile, this is at a time where I could dunk. So I didn't care about lifting. I'm like, but my sport, I'm good at my sport. So deadlifting worked, and then I kept being like, okay, well, how much can I lift? And every time I would just put more weight on the bar. The most basic conception of progressive overload without having known what progressive overload. It's like, okay, next time you add more. And then I got a job as a personal trainer, and I deadlifted and did some other random stuff, and I would chin up. I would do chin ups and say like, well, how much can I chin up? Can I do 10? Can I do 12? Can I add weight? Oh, I can add weight. What if I add more weight? That kind of a thing. So pretty decent. So Step-Ups came afterwards when I discovered Charles Poliquin. That's when all of the stuff of like the progression of Step-Ups. It's a Poliquin Step-Up, and there's no Patrick's. It was just a side Step-Up. Poliquin Step-Up, Peterson Step-Up, and just the whole discover for me was that, where you then incorporate it into a program, and you would do it. If someone had terrible knees, you would do those first, work towards split squats and all this kind of stuff before you even squatted. So it was one of those like, this is a cool solution, but so it was pretty late, I would say, from a random lifting point of view. So I think it was an interesting thing for me. Squats came late, and they came because of all of the Charles stuff, which I realized how terrible my squats were compared to other stuff that I was just naturally decent at. You had a great point, I think, some time ago, which is what's interesting is when you sort of measure a bench press as a capability of someone to exert force. Squats, if someone tells you they squat 450 or 200 kilos, or, I had a guy who said, yeah, I can squat, 200 kilos easy. I'm like, he couldn't squat 130 kilos properly the way we do it. It wasn't even close. It was like 100 and whatever. So there's such variance. So in some ways it's easy for us to be snobs and say like, wow, that's not a real squat. Okay, well then how do you measure? And how do you have someone from afar tell you how strong or not strong they are? How do you assess? Whereas a bench press, the guy says, well, yeah, I've benched, 300, I can bench 300 for 8. And and then you see if they're benching 300 pounds for 8, or if they're not really benching 300 pounds. It's an easier metric. So I remember I could bench over 300 way before I could squat over 300. So that was one of those pounds. Kilos would be more impressive. But
that tells you the nervous system works. Like it's not something to write off. Like bench press can be criticized, but if an athlete has a big bench press and they're not injured, then it's a good sign. It's not a bad thing.
Well, I think the thing, it's funny because it became a tool that was denigrated, but it's still a tool, right? Like, so, and it's very funny. Like, and I train a whole bunch of jiu-jitsu, very high level jiu-jitsu athletes in Canada. And there was a whole bunch of, well, I don't really bench press, one of the guys said. And I'm like, why? It's like, well, some trainer said that bench pressing isn't. My mindset is, well, but it's a very, very closely correlated tool for the sport of jiu-jitsu, which is lying on your back and getting someone to get the F off of you. So actually, it's obviously there's technique involved and all this other stuff, but really there's force production. And if you can bench more, your defenses become easier. So he was like, oh, I never thought of that. And the answer is because it's been demonized. And I think that's the thing. It shouldn't be demonized. It's another tool. It's when people say, well, a barbell, I would never use a barbell. Well, why? It's a great tool. It's one of the best tools. It's like, oh, I never use dumbbells. Well, just because you don't have any dumbbells. They're all great tools. The people that make kettlebells, the be all end all. No, it's a tool, but the people that dismiss kettlebells and say, they're not useless. It's a tool. Each one of these things is a tool for us to use in space and time to either get stronger or not stronger. And there's better tools for various things and worse tools. But again, that's how to use the tool. But I think the philosophic point is to realize these are tools, and we should use them with our brain and our body.
It's such an important thing because anyone can make a cake, but only some people can make a really world-class cake. And Wolfgang Onsolt said that when I went and visited him down in Stuttgart, and he's like, anyone can put food on a plate, but there's only so many Michelin 3-star chefs. And so we can all be doing the same thing, and we can all be doing something very, very different. We can all be using flour, eggs, and sugar and coming up with very different concoctions that people will pay different money for and have a different experience with. And I think that's important to acknowledge because a lot of coaches will write themselves off and say, look, we all squat, bench, deadlift, everyone, we're squat, bench, clean, like we're all doing basically the same thing. So it doesn't really matter too much. Like, no, the details make all the difference of whether someone becomes really successful or you put them into a position where they get injured and they go out the back door and they end up on painkillers, and it's like literally like life and death difference between whether you're getting these details right. So speaking about this in relation to the step up, like how do you use the step up? Like where does it fit in? How important is it? Is it peaking? Is it prep? What is it?
I think the best answer always is, it depends. So I would say, if someone comes in and their knees are blasted and they're just garbage, like it's easy for all of us that are in any way, shape, or form associated with ATG because Ben Patrick is doing such a great job for us. But the thing that's interesting is I had a guy contact me and says, well, I like what Ben's doing, but like my knees are fine. I've got a really crappy back. So with this guy, like step-ups aren't going to be the primary thing I'm going to do. I'm going to make him split squat until he has split squats coming out of his every pore of his body. And he's going to do a bunch of stretching, and he's going to do a bunch of stuff for his low back in all kinds of different ways. And I might throw in a step-up once a week for him because his knees aren't the number one thing. But I would say the worse a thing for someone, the more I attack it. And that doesn't mean attack it in the sense of like, okay, you've got a bad back and bad knees. All right, it's 500-pound back squat for you. It's like, no, we get there. If someone has bad knees, worse knees, then I'm not so quick to back squat them, and I'm much quicker to do all of the other things. So it might be during the week. I think I did a call where I talked about how would you use the step up in a way that the person can step up for the rest of their life. Because really, when we're getting paid as coaches, you have to figure out how, and that's, this we can talk more about what sort of what I'm, discussing with Ben and yourself of how we need to coach our coaches, which is to understand that we're trying to sell. Ben had a great line. He's like, we're trying to make the unsexy sexy, and Ben's doing a phenomenal job at that. So the question then is like, what are the details of it? So let's say we have someone that is lower body hurt and they need step-ups 1 to twice a week. Again, the other question you always have to ask is how many times are you seeing them? So let's assume that I'm seeing these people minimally 3 to 4 times a week, which is what we generally do here. Sometimes it's more. And again, we're talking gen pop. So if it's an athlete, it's a whole nother ball game where the return on investment and the time frame is much faster. So let's say we have, go ahead.
Were they sled before that?
Yeah, sure. It all depends. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I like
With the
using the
bad
sled.
knee. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I actually really like sledding before, so it's really easy. So let's assume this is the workout. We're going to go, and they're going to come in, and I'm going to go reverse sled. If someone gets a bit more advanced, they'll go forward, backward. But, reverse sled is the easiest thing because it's such an easy buy-in, and you love buy-ins. I love buy-ins. Buy-ins are great because it means that someone isn't just like, all right, put the bar on your back, and it's like, ugh, squatting, oof, that's big, or the deadlift, they pick up the bar. It's like, oh, by the time they get to that, I don't believe it should be 40, 45 minutes into an hour workout that they touch the bar. That's stupid. But if it's 10 minutes in, cool, where they've done some calves or they've done some, depends how crappy their calves are and how much work they need. But I would say we're going to go sled, depends on what it is. I just did a video on it, which is, an easy one is 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off. Like, you're not trying to kill them. You're shooting the shit. They're grabbing the water. They're slowly warming up. 3 sets, 3 to 4 sets, depending how warm they get, and they can start to speed it up on their own pace. But really, it's just blood flow, grooving the grease, moving, not technical. Their brain's going to start rolling. Then I do one of two things. I'll either start with the step-ups, or I'll start with their calves and tibialis raises.
Yep.
Some people, they're so garbage and they're so tight in the lower extremities that it's even good to start with a calf tib seated, so I get them on it. So it's standing calf, seated calf, tibialis raise, or tibialis raise first usually because it's just so nice and easy. They just blast into it, 3 sets, 25, 20 to 25, depends where they are, 15 to 25 really, if we're going to play intensification, and if we're going to really play all the way. 15 reps is when they're squatting heavy, but again, they're not there yet. So then we get into probably a Patrick step up because it's just the easiest to start off, and it could be low, and we start going, and I'll load them pretty quick because then they'll feel like they're working. So it'll be 20 reps.
Have you been a fan of the side step up? I do remember that was in the PICP too, but I never really used it.
The thing is that, like, the problem with Charles, and it's not a problem, it's in some ways like the gift that keeps on giving. There was so much. I was talking to it's funny, like there was a lady who's a friend of mine who lives not far from Ben, and she visited the last time I went down, and she actually introduced Ben. She biosigged him and told him about strongman and some stuff. This is over a decade ago. And Ben went off on his way and did all his stuff and whatever. But, it was great to have her come and work out.
Is it Ashley or not?
Lexi, no, not Ashley.
Okay.
So, anyway, she's great. She's a good friend.
Yep.
She's great. And what's interesting is that she's gone off and done very well. And she's very intelligent. And she's in the functional medicine world.
Yep.
And the thing is with Charles, is that you can go off on that. And you could have gone off on that and be very successful and very deep diving on all kinds of very complex stuff.
Yep.
With nutrition and brain health and gut health and microbes and molds and all kinds of crazy stuff, and help a lot of people, which is so cool. And then you could be Ben, who's like one could say the preeminent knee expert in the world, or whatever you want to call it, and there's a whole myriad of people that do all kinds of different stuff in between. There's body comp people that have never touched an athlete in their life, and bodybuilding and all kinds of stuff. Then there's people that have never touched a bodybuilder in their life, and they're, athletic performance. So there's so many different things that you could go down the path. And what's my point? My point is, Charles gave us so many exercises. He was the absolute master of saying, oh, you have a bicep. I think I did a video on this. Oh, you've got a dumbbell? Well, okay, great. This is one curl. Oh, this is one curl. Well, if you have your pinky on this side, it's a different curl. If you have your thumb on the other side, it's a different curl. And if you semi-supinate, supinating, pronated, it's, 20 different exercises, and we haven't gotten into the rep ranges or the periodization model or pauses. He was a master of every different angle exercise because he knew that variety. Really, he lived by variety as the spice of life, and we can talk upper, lower. But the idea is that lower body doesn't need as much variety, but our brains need variety. So, you can do. So I think I talked about this, or we've talked about this, where you can do a step up with dumbbells. That's fine. Then you can do a step up with the barbell on your back. That's fine. And you can do a step up with the hex bar. That's fine. And you can do a step up with, in all kinds of different ways. So you can do it sideways. You can do forwards. You can do stepping on. You can do stepping off. You can do. So the thing is, that's the genius of a coach. If we think, oh, well, all we have is one thing. So you have the side step up. Use it. Great. Awesome. You know what I mean? Oh, this.
But where does it fit for you though? Like, it's obviously less impact on the knees, a little bit more posterior chain involvement,
a little bit.
less ankle mobility.
Funnily enough, I used a high step up, and I used it, and I use it a lot Actually, I use it with a lot of my NFLers that didn't like squatting. And Charles said that you could go all the way up to a high step up or a quad where the quad is parallel or higher for 3 reps to peak. So one of my athletes had his back hurt and he was a multi-million-dollar athlete, and I didn't want to fight with him, but he wanted the stimulus. So he loved split squats. They made him feel great. He got really mobile, really strong. He was extremely explosive. He would rack pull a truck. He would do all this kind of stuff. He wasn't great at Olympic lifting, didn't really care about it. I made him do pulls. He hang cleaned forever because of, you know, the NFL and collegiate strength and conditioning make you do that. He's like, I don't really care. I just want to feel mobile and good and strong. But I got him extremely strong. He did chin-ups with 75 pounds on his waist for 3 on fat grips at 300 pounds. Pretty good for a lineman. Like,
World class.
you know, yeah, like I got him to, like I got him in one off season. I got him down to just over 280 pounds with abs, like just abs, you know, at 6'5.5". It was like, he loved it. And he did phenomenally well. He made a ton of money. He's great. He's retired now, you know, but he loved step ups. Like, he loved split squats and he loved step ups.
Yeah.
And I would peak him before camps and before games with a high step up. He loved them. And he would explode. Like, we're talking a lot of weight, dumbbells in hand. He really liked that. He didn't love the barbell on his back. He felt it was uncomfortable. But I've done that, and you go all the way up to 3 reps, all the way down to 3 reps.
Yeah.
And so I use that instead of like, well, but if you're not front squatting or back squatting, I don't know what to do with you. I was like, well, that's not true. You have to be creative, and you have to figure out a solution.
That's a great story. I think that's super powerful, and I think this whole conversation, anyone who's listening or listening back, you get that feeling of like the love of the art and the dexterity within the art, where it's very difficult to answer a question without the context, but you're getting some perspective of what, I love that example that you're given there. There, James Broughton's asked step ups short or long range. They weren't really thought about in that way, right? In the day, it was just that they were an important movement. We've started to classify movements in that way because we've found that when tendon health and rehabilitation is the primary objective, it's valuable to think about that. Bodybuilders also found it valuable to think about the joint angle and position and the amount of stretch. They were very conscious of whether the muscle was stretching or it wasn't stretching within a movement, and they would sequence the movements, and they were thought of as being quacks or thought of as being crazy for doing that, whether it comes from Vince Gironda and probably before him, that they really targeted whether the muscle was stretched or not and where that fit in the workout. I think John Meadows did great work with that, who is a good friend of Charles. So the step up, short or long, if it depends on which joint you're talking about as well, right? And how you execute the step up.
Like I've done a step up from the lowest of. I mean, listen, you can do a floor like where there's no elevation. You can do a Patrick Poliquin, Peterson. It doesn't matter. We start on the floor.
Yep.
You can start with someone on the floor. And
that's the other question here: is the increase weight or height first? So we can maybe get both of those.
I like weight first, actually. I like weight first because
me too. Yeah.
It makes people feel like they're training and you're getting load on something, which at the end of the day is what we're trying to do. Now, it sort of goes against the squat. So if someone asked me about a squat, I would say range before because 100%. The goal is to actually get a great squat, not you're biomechanic, all that. I never believed that bullshit. It never made sense to me. That, different people have different, femur length and hip, so they can't go all the way down. I'm like, okay, well then let's figure out how to get them all the way down, because truly they can. Like the only person I've seen, I have one client that I can't squat them because he's got a new knee, a new ankle, and it's 20 years old. Like he got it. He's got his knee 20 years old. He's got his ankle 4 years ago, and he squats, but it's a box squat onto a bench. But he can't get all the way down. Like literally, it will not go. It is fused.
It's quality of life at that point. It's not about. It's not the same game.
Ideology. Yeah, it's not the ideology. And he does great. Like we're talking, this guy is been blasted. It's a whole nother ball game. So I would say, yeah, find a way, but don't. I wouldn't. But so there's a lot of coaches are like, no, his joint will never go. I'm like, I think it's an amazing thing to say to people what will or will never happen. And I say this with that client, but that client, it is fused and done. It's not, well, he's different. It's like so unless it's fused, you can get all the way down. Now, and that was interesting. Someone was commenting on the guy that just visited Ben Junsu, who's Korean, and so there's the stereotype of the Asian squat, but it is what it is. That's biomechanics, and there's genetics involved. It's better or worse. And Ben's with just slightly forward lean, and mine, I have more of a forward lean because of my hips and my ankle, but I get all the way down. So different people have different angles, but it's not wrong to have a slightly forward angle. That's biomechanics with a squat. So back to the step up, I would say you've articulated the short range, long range, but if you see some of the step ups, like a triple jumper step up type thing, where it's full, knee flexion and pretty much ass is touching the heel into a step up where you have a high box. I mean, is that short range? No, it's not short range. So the point is it depends. But I would say to start, if we're starting knee rehab, even with someone who's an athlete, it doesn't matter. Knee rehab's knee rehab. You start low and slowly add weight and then add height. And the thing with these things is that, is there a KPI or not KPI? Is there a mathematical benchmark? The answer is no, because the point is everyone's different. Some people's tissue is so garbage and they're so ruined and they've done so much garbage that, and I say this the same thing with the split squat. When do you lower the front elevation? Well, that's the magic of coaching. Yep. And you try, and if it's too much, then you go back. But you still have to progress. But it might take someone 3 years, and it might take someone intra workout. I mean, I think I tell the story of the same NFL guy. He had a bad ankle. He had a plate in his ankle from an injury, and then he hurt it in one game. And then we were doing rehab on it, and we were doing a wobble board split squat, front foot wobble board split squat. Charles says, wobble boards are pretty much garbage, except once in a blue moon for 2 weeks of the year for some stuff like split squats. And it is actually really good to recalibrate the neurological aspect. So especially post-injury, it's actually not terrible. So for some people, I think I rehabbed someone's knee and it was like a month and a half on the wobble board until they could figure out and all this kind of stuff. And for this athlete, it was one workout. So they did one set, it was all over the place. They're like, okay, let me try again. Boom, straight, figured it out. Knee full straight, split squat, figured it out. So we did it twice. It was enough stimulus. Next, moving on, his ankle was fine. He got treatment too, but it depends on the capabilities of the person. So the point is, same thing with flexibility. Some people's tissue just opens up, and some people's tissue, it's like Jesus Louises. It's nutrition, it's hydration, it's damage, it's neurological, it's trauma, all kinds of stuff. So I think one of these
genetic.
Things is but when do you change? And the answer is you change when it gets slightly better. And you stimulate it, right?
Yeah. That patience and listening to what's going on and not forcing yourself into, well, someone else said I could do it or they can do it, so I should be able to do it. That's where a lot of things go south and people get themselves behind. But the thing with the step up, just to finish on the short long, the ankle range is one of the gains that can be really important as well from the Patricks. If you do max out the ankle range, then you can look at it as a longer range movement for the ankle. Generally, the step ups that we use, we would consider short range because there's no stretch. So that's the way that you can think about it. Is the muscle under stretch? The difference with the step ups though, and why? Because generally short range exercises are less aggressive, like the spider curls or the terminal knee extensions or tricep lockouts or kickbacks. They're less aggressive. They don't cause as much inflammation. They don't cause as much muscle growth. The thing with the step-ups is because, especially in the Peterson, because you're kind of replicating a movement that can damage the knee joint, or with a weak knee, you're going to feel that straight in the knee joint. So you have to consider the joint adaptation as well as the muscle. So for the muscle, it's short range and it's not going to cause massive hypertrophy or serious tissue damage. But for the joint, you could tear it up. It's something to be conservative and considerate about. So that's why I kind of have a concept of joint dominant movements, where if the joint is really what's speaking to you, then listen to the joint. Don't worry about what the weight, listen to the joint. Maybe you can lift more, but if the joint is telling you something, or if it's not going to be good after the session, then that was too much.
Right. I think there's a lot of, it's an interesting thing. This, you and I always get to the philosophical points. I think there's very much something that, I always go to Plato. There's a dialogue called the Theaetetus, which is Socrates talking to a mathematician, kind of. And there's this conception that this mathematician can understand the universe I'm summarizing very much so, that you can understand the universe in a formula. And Socrates pretty much flips it and says that there's always the human element. That's pretty much I'm summarizing. And I would say that the art of coaching is Socratic, such that you always have to understand the human part, as opposed to the mathematical, which is a formula. And I think we're always going to get up against the science guys that think that no, science hasn't come to the position yet where we're just one little discovery away from the perfect formula to do whatever it is with all humans. And I think that what's amazing about a 2,500-year-old philosophic tradition going back to Plato, which in these books it teaches us to say not so fast. The human element is always there, and it's in anything. It's in any interpretive conception of data. And I think that's the magic of it. And that's what actually fascinates me and actually what drives me, because I actually really, really like humans, or I like human interaction. So for me, when I get an athlete, whether it's Gen Pop or not Gen Pop or helping someone or whatever, I'm trying to help the human and all these factors we talk about, which is their genetics and how quick they adapt or how slow they adapt, allows me to play this game of like how I can improve them and help them and interact with them in a way that I can coax them, because it's coaxing. Because as Charles O said, muscles and movements are coaxed. You coax things, you don't blast them. And even hard training has to be coaxing. It doesn't mean it's gentle. It just means you have to find the exact quantity that's a little bit too much for the person, such that they go home and the stimulus causes adaptation and they improve. And I think that's the thing, is that's for me what's so fascinating about coaching, is it allows me to do that every day, where I'm always trying to figure out how I can do a little bit more with the person. Because obliteration is easy. So I think these questions are always good. Is it long range or is it short range? And I think the answer is it depends. And when do I use this and when do I use that? And the answer is it depends. Well, what you do is you can push and try, and you can assume certain things about certain people and not about others. I'm helping an NFL guy who plays on the Cowboys, and one would assume that it's Blaston. He's 6'7", 255 pounds, and an absolute monster. But actually needs the opposite now. Right now he needs delicate. He's on his second block of training, and the first block was so gentle. It was so gentle that, I mean, it's not zero, but it's like, because there was weight, but it's not how most of us train, which is much harder. And it's an interesting thing to realize that was my judgment call, because I knew where he was and I knew what would happen. It was my call, having seen some of his videos of how blasted he was and how worked after the season he was, such that he actually needed a lot of stuff that would rebuild him. And so he would buy in and say, oh, this is exactly what I need, as opposed to the feelings of like another trainer trying to bleed me and put me into the ground. And that's the thing, is that you would assume that a guy who's that big, well, he's bigger than I am, he's clearly stronger and faster than I am, and he's fighting gorillas. Well, we're going to have to actually make him like, it's gorilla training. No, it's not. There's a pace to it, and there's a patience that takes smart coaching, that you decide when to do what and where.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's what you're going to get from Ben Clarfield is nuance. I think the ATG coach is going to give a lot more nuance to coaches, and that's what coaches need. I think it makes all the difference, and there's different areas that you can find nuance in communication. With Ben, Patrick is phenomenal with the way he communicates things and inspires people to take action. You only have to look at what's happened over the last few years. We've all got our strengths with these things, and listening in, it's going to help a lot of coaches go a lot further and just love what they do. There's a question here about how to help 12-year-olds love step-ups. Ruben Parada is saying he's coaching a kid for Muay Thai, and he finds that when he's doing the physical stuff, he doesn't get the same buy-in. He's training twice a week. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I don't think you can't train kids like you train us. Like it can't be. It has to be fun. Like you have to make it a challenge and make it a game.
Yeah.
And so I think having a prescriptive sets and reps actually is a mistake.
Yeah.
I actually think a 12-year-old has to have fun. And I don't even know if I would coach step-ups, to be honest. I would sled the kid and race him, make him race it and make it be that kind of thing. Because actually, and Ben talks a lot about this, sometimes you don't need the step-up if they sled. So I would sled the living daylights out of him. I would sled in all kinds of different ways, backwards, forwards. There's also sideways type stuff. I would actually do squats, full squats. I would do a heel elevated squat. I would make him squat. And the thing with step-ups is it's hard to quantify numbers for kids, but you can get a kid stronger. 12-year-old kid can squat. I mean, make sure it's perfect and then add load. That's what I've done. I've done it with my kid. I have a kid who's 21 now. He's serious. He's just started to get his pro. He's university player, rugby scrum half. I think I told Keegan about this.
Yeah, I've
He's
seen.
about
Yeah,
70 kilos, squatting 150 kilos. He's a beast. But he's a guy that shouldn't be playing. Like, he's not genetically gifted. He's garbage. He's like, his body's garbage. But I've made it not garbage. He's kind of like Ben in the sense of like, but for rugby, it's like, it's not. He's not meant to be. Like, he wasn't meant to be an athlete. Like, he's very, very cerebral, very intelligent, and I made him squat early. I taught him the Olympic lifts early. I mean, I could do anything with him. This kid, make him throw ball, make him throw stuff, make him, like, I would sled the living daylights out of the kid and make it a race, make it fun, make him beat his times. That's what I would do. I would not technical over technique the kid.
Yeah,
that's what I would do.
I love it. It's a great answer. It's a question from Joseph Weston. Do you guys have a step-up equivalent for shoulders?
It's a really good question. I think we were talking less in the group. I have a call at 1, and I've been talking about, I think people make a mistake to think that the shoulder and the lower body are the same. And I keep harping on this. I think I like it when people are trying to see similarities, and it's good to look back to our ancestors, the apes, and then look at horses, and then how the shoulder is and isn't. And we make different demands of our upper body than we do of our lower body. And I'm going to get back to this point about the lower body is stupid, the upper body is smart. The upper body is we make demands of our upper body. What do I mean by that? We make demands of our upper body that are fine motor. We're playing with. No one looks at anyone and says, "Wow, that person is so impressive. They can text on a phone." That's not impressive. Everyone can do that. But if you could do that with your toes, fine motor skills, that would be impressive. We demand fine motor skills of our upper body. That mean that we need all kinds of different angles with our shoulder and our fingers and all this kind of stuff. So the variety is different for the upper body. You need different variety and different angles, and much more of a look. All the stuff that I'm doing, it's not impressive. But if I could do all this stuff, with my feet, everyone would be impressed. Our feet and our legs are much more for gross motor movement. We're standing on them, we're running, we're jumping. Sometimes we're kicking. That's why soccer is an impressive game. Not that I like it. It's because people can do stuff with their feet that is impressive. But the point is that it's for explosive movement that you're sitting on and standing on. So thinking of the shoulder in the same way, I don't think of it in the same way. The movement of your upper body is something that you have to think about. That, like, that's why we encourage rotator cuff strength so much at ATG. It's so neglected because everything has to come out of the shoulder. Everything upper body needs the stability of the shoulder. So I wouldn't say it that way. That's why it was a joke. I think I hashtagged one of the posts, whatever, what is it? Elbows over fingers guy. Like, it's not the same, and so to think that it's the same is a mistake, I think. So I think trying to make analogies is good. Being creative intellectually is good, but we also have to be open to where it's not correct. So I think I would say the upper body and the lower body are not analogous, and the upper body has to be treated. I'll give a great example. A significant quantity of people in the bodybuilding world get obscenely huge upper bodies that are shredded, jacked, and have tons of muscle, and their legs look terrible because they try to train their legs in the same way as their upper body. The lower body needs repeated effort. And I think I posted this recently. I think someone's talking about differences in squat or whatever, or heel elevation, quad. Oh yeah, Keegan, we were asked this by a great coach, Nick, about heel elevation regarding the squat. And my comment was, I made a comment that I learned this about the old Italian weightlifting team, is that they just would change shoes every 3 weeks. And their workouts were the same. And that was enough for their lower body to have the stimulus for them to actually make gains and progress. Just heel elevation. Each shoe was slightly different, and that was enough. So for the lower body, you can hit the same thing again and again with slight variations. Now, there's compliance, right? So the question of the step up is, it's possible that you'll do, I think I wrote this, 20 reps for 3 weeks of a Patrick step up, where you slowly progress in load with dumbbells and height. And then 3 weeks later, you decide to do a Poliquin step up with a bar on your back for both height and load. And then 3 weeks later, you decide to do a Peterson step up with dumbbells. And then you go back to Patrick step up 3 weeks. So it's all still a step up. It's a lot of variation because you're like, oh, it's a Peterson. It's just a step up. you're doing the same thing again and again and again with slight variation just so that you don't get bored and there's some stimulus. But the upper body is a different ballgame. The upper body, you have to hit different angles. Like, so we have the rotator cuff, and a video is going to come out very soon where I'm going to show multiple different variations of the rotator. Yes, we have our metric our standard, and Charles did that, but there's a myriad different rotator exercises, and all are good. So in some ways, I would actually say the upper body shouldn't be thought of as the step up, because you could do well by just repeating the step up really. Like if you got really good at the Patrick step up over a year, really good things are going to happen. But if you just did the same things for your upper body, actually bad things would happen. So in some ways, it takes an intellectual switch. And obviously, all of our fascial chains are connected. But there's some things that we demand of that are different than other things on different parts of our body. So I would say, no, there is not an upper body step up. How's that for a long-winded answer on that? But I think it's important to understand the desire to make things analogous. Well, the knee is this, so we'll just do it for the elbow. It's not the same. We make different demands.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The thing with if you were using the step up to help with knee tendon issues, and that was the alternative that you were using to sled, which you wouldn't do that. Like you want to use the sled, but I have seen really good results with using tricep extensions for elbow tendonitis. You know, all you've said, I 100% agree with. And for the shoulder, there definitely isn't, you know, the step up, the hip doesn't do that much on the step up. So the shoulder and the step up, they don't really relate very well. But elbow tendonitis, I would say like that's maybe a little gem that someone takes away from today. Right. I've cleared up elbow tendonitis with the same kind of philosophy, thinking about, okay, what would the knee do for this? Just getting a lot of blood flow to it, lockout type work before getting into your French presses or skull crusher type movements that are much harder on the tricep tendons. I would say there's like still some value in it. They're not the same, and there's a lot more complexity possible, but there's some tricks there that could help people as well.
Yeah, again, like but that's, you know, back to the thing is that I think that you're one of your brilliant gems, or one of your most brilliant takeaways that I would say you've contributed to strength and conditioning, is this idea of short, long. And I think if you think of it that way, then yes, you can apply that to any joint. Even the shoulder, you can apply that from a quote unquote rehab or a warm up point of view. And I think you can get great benefit. So if we're going to some form of tricep extension in the short, in the lockout type stuff that can bless, yes. So then yes, you could have some form of step up type idea. But I think the way I think about it is, I don't know how helpful that is to understand the upper body versus the lower body. And I think in some ways it's connected back to my major point, which is the demands even that we make of the elbow from a point of view of gripping and all kinds of different stuff. Yeah, I mean, having come off elbow surgery last year from a jiu-jitsu injury, and I did all your stuff, and all your stuff is great, and it helped. But there's so much stuff that, like, I needed so much grip work for my elbow. So I think, whereas a step up, I think, can do so much for the knee, it's not the only thing. I don't know if we're going to play games of how much of a percent of the thing I don't know. I mean, that
to get back to BJJ as well. To get back to BJJ after an elbow surgery as quickly, as you have, like, that's the ultimate demand on the elbow, really, where people potentially going to want to armbar you. You're grabbing things like you need everything from that elbow.
Right.
It's almost like if you were doing leg locks and all that stuff with the legs, like it's almost the most you can ask for from the joint. So from surgery, from being cut to that is like a lot of rebuilding. I was listening to Devin Larratt. I'm not sure if you've come across. He's a Canadian, right? Arm wrestler. He's a world champion arm wrestler. I'm not sure if you've seen him, but I love his stuff, and I love watching his training. I think it's really important for coaches to look at. Okay, this guy's a strength athlete, and what really matters is his elbow and his wrist. But he says it's like 3 years after a surgery before you can expect to be like a legit arm wrestler again after a serious surgery. It's like, it's no joke to come back from that.
Hold on, I seem to have cut out.
I've still got you there. There's I don't know if you can hear, but there's a ton of questions, but I think that we should probably wrap it for the.
1 second.
I can still hear you, Ben. I don't know if you guys can hear Ben, but sometimes things jump in. So we do have a call in just under 2 hours live with ATG coaches. I definitely will. I'm planning to use this YouTube channel more, connecting you guys up with more of the coaches to share more value. Yeah, Tim's saying you're coming through. We can hear you, Ben, and I can still see you as well. So I don't know if you can hear us or not, but all right. Well, yeah, I think we might wrap it for there today, but it was great to have you guys on and great to have the questions. And I'm planning to do more of these together with coaches. I have Marcus Philly coming up. I'm trying to get Nsima Inyang on and some of the other top coaches from the community. So if you want to see more of them, then let me know. And are you back there, Ben? Can you hear us?
I can.
Yeah, okay. We'll wrap it there, guys, but appreciate it. And if you want to be a part of ATG for Coaches, or if you've got any questions about it, please just get in touch or message ATG for Coaches on Instagram to ask anything and get feedback. So